The battle of the best was a blowout. The biggest Sunday shocker and the worst played their best. We've got all that and more because it's time for Sunday Night Blitz. Welcome to Sunday Night Blitz. He's Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz. Frank, obviously our Yahoo Sports NFL and betting extraordinaire. Me, I'm just here to have a good time. We've got so much to get into, Frank. It was a massive, massive game. We're getting hit every single game. But I will say quickly as we get into all of it, I don't know what the hell we're watching anymore. Like, I'm just trying to figure out week in and week out who's good, who's bad. And, like, I get this sense that this is going to be one of those years where every week I lose money and I sit there and I look at the end of the day and say, how did that happen?
Quarter to quarter. I mean, there were games today when, I'm writing, okay, the Chiefs game is over. I'm just going to make some silly comments about Taylor Swift to call it a night. And then Zach Wilson plays out of his mind for 2 quarters and it's a game, or the Broncos are getting blown out and they come back. It's just, yes, this was a really, really weird day in the NFL, but a fun one. And you're right. Like, it's just a snow globe, gets turned over. Everything changes. Like, it's crazy how the NFL just changes from week to week, quarter to quarter, half to half. It's just the most unpredictable league, and that's why we love it.
I had one friend text me right before the Raiders game and say, wellness check with Hayden O'Connell starting. And then at halftime, he texted me again, wellness check with the Raiders not doing well. And then in the fourth quarter, he texted me again, wellness check because the Raiders were suddenly doing better. And then at the end, he texted me, wellness check. And I was like, hey, find a new line. I'm just saying, all right, we got a lot to get into.
That's perfect. That is like perfect for the NFL this year, where all 4 of those texts can be answered a different way based on where you are in the game, because nothing lasts.
By the way, nothing lasts, including I didn't have any donuts today. Maybe that was the whole problem. Like, I didn't have the donuts today. I was like, you know what? I don't need the donuts. I'm just going to enjoy the game. Well, would have rather had the donuts. Okay, the one game we all knew we were going to enjoy was Miami taking on Buffalo in Buffalo. The biggest game had all the eyeballs. Buffalo gets a statement win, 48-20. This was a big moment for the Bills. This was a big moment.
Wait. We're not going to just gloss over this so quickly. I had producer Stone has saved some audio from the other day. Well, why don't you play that clip, Stone, of us talking about Bills Dolphins earlier this week? The Bills are good too, okay? Like, the Bills are going to win on Sunday. I'll say it right now, and if I'm wrong, I will be here on Sunday night with you, and I'll take the L. But the Bills are going to win on Sunday. They're a better overall team. They have been for a couple of years. Jason Fitz, I ask you now to take your L, because here I am calling the Bills. Maybe didn't call a blowout, but I was pretty confident, wasn't I? Wasn't I right about that one? I'm just saying.
You work with some dumbass that was loudly screaming, these power rankings are the worst. How are the Dolphins not at the top of them? Totally unrelated note. Anybody know how to prepare crow properly? Because I got a whole plate of it to eat, man. Like, I really thought, and look, early on in this game, Devin Achan, I want to say it right now.
Yeah,
Achan goes off early in the game, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be the same thing. I was actually sitting there talking to a friend as the Dolphins scored quickly, and he said to me, he's like, yep, best team in the NFL. I said, I don't know how you stop them. 20 minutes later, all of a sudden, it looked like the wheels fell off. The Bills figured out everything in stopping him. They got a 48-20 win that, frankly, wasn't really as close as the score. I mean, they absolutely kicked the snot out of the Dolphins. And now I'm sitting here saying, well, okay, is there some method to this? Like, I was a little stunned. I thought it would be a back-and-forth, high-scoring game. I did not expect Buffalo to run away with it.
Yeah, and I mean, the only bad thing is this sets up a week of everybody overreacting to the Bills now. I mean, but the Bills are legit. I mean, they are a heck of a football team. And the one thing they did is they got pressure on Tua. Nobody else had done that. He'd only taken 1 sack through 3 games. But this Bills defense, which doesn't even have Von Miller yet, don't forget, it's like another midseason trade for Von Miller. Like, they're going to be adding him in a few weeks. And that's going to make them even better. You're right. The Dolphins came out. They scored right away, twice, 2 touchdowns, 2 possessions. And even I'm like, wow, what is this going to be? 49-48? Like, are we going to get that kind of game? I'm just going to tell you what the Dolphins did the rest of the game after those 2 touchdowns. Punt, fumble, punt. They did score a touchdown. Then it was interception, turnover on downs. That is an incredible run for a defense that is probably now going to start to get its respect. It had shut out its previous two opponents, not great opponents. Sorry, the Raiders are involved in that, Fitz. But look, the Dolphins offense is good. Like I was making fun all week about people going crazy and like this was the greatest show on turf part 2. No. They're not there yet, but there's a very good offense. But the Bills defense was up to the task and their offense was amazing. And right now, if you had to ask me the best team in football, I'll say the 49ers, but we're going to hear a lot this week about maybe the Bills are the best team of football. And just because they lost to the Jets week 1, it doesn't mean that much. I mean, unless you're the 1972 Dolphins, you lost a football game at some point. The Bills are just fine. They've had 3 outstanding performances in a row. And, both of us picked them to win Super Bowl before the season. I think we're looking pretty good with that. I think that they're going to be one of those teams at least in it at the end. And we'll see if they can finally finish it for Buffalo fans. I hope they do. But, man, they look good these past 3 weeks.
So here's what concerned me coming into the season. I say after week 1 concerned me, actually. Coming into the season, I expected the stupid throws and the non-necessary aggressiveness to all be gone from Josh Allen. Week 1, it felt like there was a bunch of that with the Jets. Mm-hmm. And so I came out of that kind of saying, man, I don't know. Like I thought all of these demons would be chased away and they're right here again. So that sort of had me in my feels. Since that week, what we've seen is Josh has found the perfect balance between being aggressive and being careful with the football. What's really surprising to me is I thought in this game he was going to have to be patient and essentially not try and get into a shootout, just rely on, hey, live to see another down. I don't think Josh Allen always does that well in certain games. In this game, he didn't do that. He was aggressive and it worked, right? Like that's the thing for me is it feels like this whole enlightening light bulb moment of Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen being on the same page, I thought would start week 1. It didn't. I think I have to almost take week 1 as that outlier that week 1 could be and now say, well, what have we seen since? And you're right. You did it against a couple of probably bad teams. Now you've done it against a very good team. I'm stepping back from the Bills and saying, okay, what questions do they have that need to be answered right now? I don't think there are many, right? Like I think Buffalo has shown you that they are going to be that impossibly difficult out. And what's going to be wild is that, I started off by saying there aren't very many good teams this year or great teams this year. There are a handful of them, though, and the handful of them are spectacular. Like the Bills are a great football team. So I took a lot out of this because I thought this was really a prove-it moment. I can't say that on Thursday and back down from that on Sunday. So whatever I needed to see from Buffalo, they showed me.
The one question I have about Buffalo, and this is nothing new, but it's still just the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs show. Now, I will say Gabriel Davis has shown up a lot more consistently this year. James Cook makes splash plays. He wasn't great today, but he did have the long 48-yard catch. That helps. I mean, if he can get the rookie tight end Kincaid going, Dawson Knox had an awesome play on the sideline. He just ran people over. If he can get these guys really going so it's not just all on Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen too, but the beauty of it is Stephon Diggs is awesome. Like he was great in this game, had the awesome touchdown. I just, at some point when the Bills are really cooking like this, they are the most complete team in football. There's not another team, except maybe the 49ers, that can match their offense and defense, and even special teams are pretty good. So just an impressive overall performance by them. And honestly, I'm not much lower on the Dolphins than I was before this game. I know the Dolphins are a very good football team. They're going to be a good football team. I just don't think they're as good as the Bills. There's no crime in that. I think the Bills are going to win the AFC East. The Dolphins are going to be the scariest wildcard team in football, and that's just kind of where we are. I'm not like, oh my God, Tua was exposed. None of this stuff. You're going to hear overreactions because that's just what we do. Don't overreact. The Dolphins are just fine. They just played a much better team today. The Bills are legit. The Bills, they're coming. I mean, they're probably already here. They just haven't finished the deal yet. And I root for underdogs, right? I'm from Milwaukee. I've rooted for bad teams my whole life. I root for the Bills. I do, unabashedly, because I want these fans to get to experience a Super Bowl championship. And make no mistake about it, this Bills team can do it. They are definitely, like you said, among those handful of teams that really are special this year.
All right, so if I can't overreact to that game, can I, good sir, overreact to this one? Because the Cincinnati Bengals got the you-know-what kicked out of them by the Titans. And if you've been listening to this show from week 1, you know that I came in and I was like, oh, the Titans are going to be good. And then I had to come in and say, sorry, Frank, I'm wrong. Titans suck. So I went into this game saying, okay, even though the Titans offensive line is absolutely putrid, and even though, I didn't have high expectations for the Titans at all in this, they went in and just They dominate. They didn't beat the Bengals. They dominated the Bengals. What the hell, Frank? Like, what's wrong with Cincinnati?
Yeah, I took my lap on getting the Bills right, but man, was I wrong about the Bengals. Ooh-wee. Are they just bad? Like, this is 4 games. Okay, 4 games is a small sample, but it's not. It's a quarter of a season, really. And they've had 4 bad offensive performances. They got by the Rams. Good for them. Great. They have not looked good on offense yet. Offensive line isn't playing well. Burrow looks less than healthy, obviously. But I don't think that explains everything. Like, I don't think Burrow is so hurt that he just can't throw the football anymore. They're getting nothing downfield. In this game, I think they had 135 yards passing. Their longest reception was 17 yards, and that's been every single week like this. Week 1, we were both in Vegas together saying, oh my God, this Browns defense are awesome. If you could shut down the mighty Bengals, you might have something cooking. And they do. Cleveland's very good on defense. But now we look at it after week 4 and we're like, this Bengals offense is just broken. There's something wrong. And I don't know that they can fix it. As we talked about earlier this week, you just can't sit Joe Burrow. You can't, if you're Zach Taylor, there's no turning back now. You're 1-3. You can't sit him. You can't be like, take 4 weeks off, because all of a sudden you're 2-6, 1-7, and you're done. Your season's over. So I don't know I do not know where the Bengals go from here. The Titans do not have a good pass defense. No matter if I'm wrong sometimes about the Titans or anything like that, they have a bad pass defense, and they absolutely shut down Joe Burrow. The 4th straight game he has struggled. I don't know what to make of them at this point. I think we just kind of have to somehow, like, I can't even wrap my head around it, Fitz, that the Bengals are bad. How did this happen? This was one of those handful of teams who was supposed to be a Super Bowl contender, and they are certainly not at this point.
So I put a lot of this on Zach Taylor. You mentioned him earlier, and I think if you go back to the beginning of Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor, in the very beginning when there was no offensive line, they were still trotting him out there to throw 60 times a game. I mean, the usage on him early in his career was absolutely asinine, right? And I kept saying, you're going to get the guy murdered back there. It just feels like there needs to be somebody. There should have already been somebody. They looked at Burrow and said, man, you got to sit. Like, you got to get better. Like, because I felt like I was watching today was a little bit of what we talked about last week, because you're 1,000% right. Now you're dug into a hole. And when you're dug into this hole, how do you get your way out? There's no easy answer to that. But realistically, they should have sat him down and just said, hey, if we take a few losses, we got to have something more than this. Because if this is the version of Burrow that you're going to get the rest of the year, this is going to be this team's nowhere close to a playoff team. And there has to be some change in your offensive philosophy in what you're doing to get rid of the ball quickly and to just get the ball out of his hand. Like, how do you make all of this work with the weapons you have? So it feels like the offense isn't built to be able to maneuver around the version of Burrow they have. And like, it all just feels like a cluster, that just, it's gross to watch. And like you mentioned, feeling bad for the Bills. I feel bad for Bengals. You're finally in that moment where you're like, everything's golden. We got us Burrow. Everything's going to be beautiful. And instead, you're just right in that middle of that barrel of suck all over again. Like, this is just hard to watch for Bengals fans.
Yeah. You know who was right was Jamar Chase. Remember in August, he said, I don't want Joe to play week 1. I want him to sit for a while, get right. And everybody kind of laughed like, oh, the receiver, whatever. What do you know? You're not a doctor. I don't think LSU gave you your medical degree. But Jamar Chase was right. Joe Burrow should have sat. And now you look back and you're like, that should have been the plan from the outset. And let me ask you this. If I were to ask you, the Bengals finish over 500 this year, you say yes or no?
They have to. There's no way.
How can they finish over 500 at this point? They're a bad football team. I guess I'd have to, if you asked me that question, I'd probably be like, I guess, yeah, but there's been no signs that they're a good team yet. Yeah, they won one desperation game on a Monday night at home against the Rams, and they barely won that one, by the way. They're just a bad football team right now, and I can't explain it. I just can't sit here and tell you how this happened.
You mentioned Vegas, and I think we both experienced this. Anybody listening has at some point. Like, you have that night at the roulette table where you win, and you're like, you're there for 4 or 5 days. So you feel like you're on a heater, nothing can stop you. And all of a sudden you have one of those nights where everything's going wrong. And you just keep throwing, good money at bad, and you keep doubling down. And then you realize, like, you put so much in that you got nothing left. I feel like that's where the Bengals are. By playing him already, by playing Burrow, they are pot committed to a bad hand now, and they got to figure out a way to scratch and claw their way out. And you're right, man. If they miss the playoffs with Joe Burrow at this point, and with the contracts that they're all about to have to face, if they miss the playoffs, that whole city's going to lose their damn mind. And I don't blame them. They're going to, like, everybody's going to have their job on the line if they miss the playoffs. It's the most stunning development of the early portion of the season to me is that the Cincinnati Bengals right now suck.
No, I know. I mean, like we talked about power rankings the other day. Where do you realistically put the Cincinnati Bengals this week if you're me tomorrow when I'm doing this? I don't know. Like, it's hard to have them in the top half of the league. And you're right. If T. Higgins, he's coming up on a free agency thing, and Jamar Chase has his contract coming up. And if you're a Bengals fan, you were just so overjoyed at how good this team was. They're a Logan Wilson bad holding penalty, bad call anyway, from winning a Super Bowl, right? But you're like, okay, well, we gave Mahomes and the Chiefs all they could handle in Arrowhead. We're going to be back. We're going to be. And if you miss the playoffs, and it's like, I don't know how you could bet on the Bengals to make the playoffs at this point. Like we talked about, this is just, I don't know. It's ugly there.
It was not ugly on Sunday Night Football. Kansas City taking on the Jets. The Chiefs get a 23-20 win. There was 17-0 early on to the point that we were sitting there saying this game is just gross. And then all of a sudden, you end up with a really good game. I got to give the Jets a lot of credit, man. Like, the Jets played hard in this game. Zach Wilson played good. I've played well, listen to me. But I don't know that I'm going to suddenly, double down that this can be replicated. But, hey, give them their flowers.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wrote about at the end of the game, was just saying, good for the Jets that they got something positive going, but at the end of the day, it's just a loss. Like, they're 1-3. Like, this team with Super Bowl dreams, and we're not just patting them on the back like they're a little league team. Like, this was a loss for them. And I don't know. I just watched a football game where Zach Wilson basically outplayed Patrick Mahomes. Like, what in the world was going on? All of a sudden, Zach Wilson played like the best 2 quarters of his life since he was beaten up on Coastal Carolina. Like, he was just back shouldering guys, hitting guys in rhythm. It's like, is this Zach Wilson? And he ran in for that 2-point conversion. It's 2020. You're like, oh my God, they're going to do this. Mahomes just lofting passes. They're just getting picked off. A terrible call, by the way, on Sauce Gardner. Keeps that drive alive at the end. That was just an inexcusable call. Like, refs love throwing penalties to bail out offenses on 3rd down, and they did it here. Robert Saleh lost his mind. He got a 15-yard penalty at the end of the game for it. But, the Jets fought hard, and that's great, and that's what we should be talking about. But I'm just like, it's just, they're 1-3. There's no time for this. Like, maybe, I guess, when you're not playing the Chiefs, you start to win some games, you get back in the playoff race. But to me, it was just, this is the best they could do. This was a pretty good stretch for Wilson, that offense, all that, and they still couldn't win. Like, that's going to be a little disheartening for them. These guys aren't into moral victories,
But it's also a game where the Chiefs didn't look right. And we've seen that a couple times now. The Chiefs don't look right. And I'm not going to freak out because every year there's a segment of 4 or 5 games where the Chiefs don't look right. We're all saying, give up on Kansas City, and then it gets fined by the playoffs. But right now, Mahomes was just out of sync. The offense doesn't have any go-to guys that are getting open. He's having to run around like a maniac just to try and find a way to force the ball somewhere and pray to God that somebody can make a play. Like, the Chiefs don't look right.
I think they're going to get there. I do. I just had this blind faith. And go back and look at the first quarter. When they're up 17-0, I thought, all right, here's the Chiefs. Like, this is what we've been waiting for. They're going to blow this team out 40-3 or whatever, and it just didn't happen. But, I mean, I at least see signs from the Chiefs. I do think their defense is good. I don't know how Zach Wilson played out of his mind. It's like the Will Ferrell scene in Old School when he debates. He's like, oh, I blacked out. What the heck happened? That's going to be Zach Wilson at some point. He's going to be like, he's going to be watching film and not even know it's himself. But, I think the Chiefs offense, I think Rashee Rice is going to be really good. I think he's a big key for them. He has some juice. They need to get him more involved. We saw Isaiah Pacheco play really well. I think he's finally healthy, getting into the flow of things. He missed most of August with an injury. Mahomes is going to be Mahomes. Kelsey's going to be fine. I think they're going to be fine. I think they'll be a really, really good football team. But yeah, you're right. They're almost like the Eagles, who I'm sure we're going to talk about later too, where they're winning games, but it just doesn't look like them yet. And I think it will click for that Chiefs. But you're right. They're just a little bit off so far.
Yeah, it's not going to click for New England. The other big game we got to get to, we will get to all of them, but the other big game is that New England just got decimated by remember? It was like, oh, well, I don't know. The Cowboys, they struggled against the Cardinals, woke them up, and they came out with the thunder of the gods, and they absolutely just pushed Mac Jones into the ground and said, sit down, boy. Like, it was a dominating effort by the Dallas defense. Mac Jones gets benched in this game 28-3, and it wasn't that close.
No, this was the Mac Jones ain't it game, right? Like, this is kind of all right, he's just not good. I mean, he had some terrible turnovers. The pick six before the first half was just inexcusable for an NFL quarterback. And, he got yanked late in the third quarter when the Cowboys were winning by 1,000,000 points. And Belichick said after the game, like, no, I wasn't benching for bad performance. Just why have him in there? What's the point? But part of that is they don't got nobody else. Bailey Zappi, they cut him at the end of preseason. They brought him back, but that told you everything you need to know. I think if Bill had any other option right now, he'd go to him. Mac Jones is not playing the type of football Bill Belichick's going to put up with for very long. But what else is he going to do? Bailey Zappi ain't the guy either. I just think I had this hope that the Patriots would be this competitive team this year, be a tough out. They are going to be most weeks, I think, a tough out. But it's clear that they just need to start over a quarterback. I don't know where that path leads them, but it probably ain't Mac Jones.
But this is what every fan base eventually has to deal with. When you don't have the guy, you're just suddenly floundering. And I can say all of this with the utmost respect to what Belichick has accomplished in the past. But the Patriots right now are washed. They're no good. They have a better chance, in my mind, of being a top 6 or 7 pick in the NFL draft than they do of being anywhere near the playoffs. And that's because the roster's not good enough, which is Belichick's fault. Belichick has built a roster that isn't good enough. Belichick, the coach, is hamstrung by Belichick, the GM, and it's not good enough. If you want Super Bowls in Foxborough again, you are going to have to find somebody else to bring in the personnel because Bill Belichick cannot do it.
Yeah, and how does that conversation go between Kraft and Belichick, right? hey, Bill, you've built, I don't want to say it's the NFL's worst roster because there are some bad ones out there, but it has to be among the worst as far as amount of blue chip players. They just don't have a lot of dudes that could just win games for you. And that's what you need in the NFL. That's what the Patriots had for 20 years, especially the guy who was wearing number 12. They don't have those dudes. They're a very thin football team. They got a lot of good players and not a lot of great ones. And it's showing. And how do you even, if you're Robert Kraft and wow, this really ain't working like it used to, you're not firing Bill Belichick. You're just not. He's the greatest coach of all time. I still haven't given up on that opinion at all. I mean, Bill is the greatest coach of all time, but we're seeing now, like you said, if you don't got that dude at quarterback, everything's tough. Not many coaches could win with it unless you build the San Francisco 49ers roster around Brock Purdy. Then it could work. Patriots ain't got that roster, and they ain't got a quarterback either. And now Bill Belichick's kind of in this no man's land still, and they're not going to be bad enough to get a Drake May or a Caleb Williams. It's just going to be this never-ending cycle for the Patriots. I don't know how they get out of it.
Yeah, which is how most teams feel when you don't have a Brady. You're stuck in mediocrity. It's nothing makes this easier. The Patriots have the worst. They have the worst team in their own division. They have the worst roster in their own division. I would even argue, and I know this sounds sacrilegious to Jets fans, they got the worst quarterback in their own division. The only thing they've got that isn't the worst in their division is their head coach, and that's not going to be enough without everything else being changed to make them competitive anytime soon. We have got to get to every single game we are going to, including one game that absolutely shocked me. We will talk about it next as we go through all the games of Week 4. Welcome back to Sunday Night Blitz. Frank Schwab, Jason Fitz. Hey, Frank, were you in on the Toy Story broadcast? Were you watching this thing with Slinky Dog expanding and contracting and doing all that stuff?
I didn't. I saw a lot of clips on it. Did you watch it? I've heard very mixed reviews, but it looked fun to me. I don't know.
I think as a society, we need to learn the phrase of hey, that's not my thing, but it's cool. I think a lot of people had these big opinions about Toy Story. And to me, if it made a kid watch the game with their parents, that's all that matters, right? The NFL tried something new, tried something fun. I thought it was cool. I did think the animators were a little weird though. I don't know why every guy skipped leg day. They all had these big potties and these tiny itty bitty toothpicks for legs. But it was a fun way. And what did it shook me a little bit was the angle they were using for Toy Story was actually kind of an all 22. So you could see who was open far better than you can on the TV broadcast. Yeah, it was for that. It was delightful, which only made it more painful for Falcons fans to watch their team lose 23-7. Are you in? By the way, I'm just going to be honest here. I hate the international series so much. I have no interest in a 6:30 Pacific time football game between two meh teams, and if it's good teams, then it should have happened over here. So I'm not big on the London thing, but I mean, Atlanta goes out, they get their ass kicked, and I'm still sitting here saying 2 words: Desmond Ridder. You're not going to be good. You're not going to do what you want to do in that division with Desmond Ridder.
They had a shot to throw an amazing offer sheet at Lamar Jackson, and they didn't. They just never move the needle for them for some reason. And it was always, oh, we're really sold on Desmond Ridder. Now, Ben Albright, who I know out here, he's at 850 KOA in Denver, tweeted out that people within Atlanta knew that the Ravens were going to match any offer sheet. And they were just worried about, at that point, Ridder's confidence and his two things about that. You still try. Who cares? They match it. But the Falcons had the kind of cap space where they could have made a contract offer that would have made it really, really, really tough on the Ravens. Yeah, maybe they do match it. Okay, well, at least you tried. And B, if you're that worried about Desmond Ridder, that he's going to have his whole confidence shaken because you tried to sign a 26-year-old former MVP, then he ain't that dude anyway. Don't worry about it. You already know then this ain't our guy. So both things make no sense to me. I will never understand why 2023, the Atlanta Falcons did not try to get Lamar Jackson when it was perfectly laid out for them. Franchise tag, give them an offer sheet. You have more cap space than you know what to do with, but yet they're signing, Jesse Bates. Hey, great, Jesse Bates is a nice player. He ain't Lamar Jackson. Desmond Ridder is not a very good quarterback, and that's why the Atlanta Falcons are just stuck. They're just whatever. We kind of talked about the other day. I think the Falcons are going to finish 8-1. They're going to find a way to tie a game so they finish exactly 500.
Frank put a tie in there. Frank got the tie in there. Come on,
They are the most average team in the NFL. There's no ceiling for them. And they're just whatever. They're just the whatever team of this NFL season.
Just a reminder, you think they're average, and that's a big upgrade from where I think they are. I am not. And if you score 7 points with those offensive weapons, your quarterback's a problem. But this is where it gets interesting to me because that division overall kind of sucks. We all know that. Tampa Bay goes in and absolutely just they beat down New Orleans 26-9 on that game. Derek Carr was questionable all the way up to it, ended up playing. It didn't look easy, didn't look right, didn't look good, but Tampa Bay did, and they get a 26-9 win. And I'm sitting over saying, man, I don't know, Atlanta, I don't believe in Atlanta. I don't believe in Carolina. I don't believe in New Orleans. New Orleans hasn't looked good. So, by default, am I suddenly buying in on Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers?
He's looked good. I mean, I know he's not setting a world on fire. He's not going to win an MVP award or anything, but he's been a competent quarterback for them this year, except really if he struggled a little bit against the Eagles. Well, so what? The Eagles are a really good football team. In this one, he kind of took a cheap shot, and he got upset, and he just balled out after that. And on the other side, when you were talking about Burrow, that somebody needed to kind of step in and say, you need to sit. Zach Taylor should have said, you need to sit. Somebody needed to tell Derek Carr, you're not playing in this game. He had 23 completions in this game for 127 yards. He clearly could not throw the ball. It's just there's nothing.
Jameis, Jameis is sitting right there.
He's not a slappy. He threw for 5,000 yards in a season once. Yeah, he's probably going to throw 4 interceptions in the same game that he throws for 400 yards, but he gives you a chance to win where Derek Carr gave them no chance to win. I thought it was a really, really bad day for Dennis Allen putting him out there. All credit to Carr trying to be tough. And he is tough. I'm not saying he's not. Sometimes that gets in the way of what's best for the team. And the best thing for the team was Derek Carr sitting. He goes out there when he was clearly compromised, plays poorly, and now they lose anyway. You're not any healthier going forward. I thought this was a really bad day for the Saints to put Carr out there when he obviously was not ready to play at the level he needs to play at. But you had a really, really good day for the Buccaneers. You look now and it's this was a quality win for them, getting a win on the road against a team I think we both would agree is probably the most talented in that division. Well,
oh yeah, no doubt.
Not a Buccaneers at 3-1 with a game in hand, a road win against the Saints. Pretty impressive, and all the credit to Baker Mayfield for basically resurrecting his career at this point.
Yeah, and I think part of that Baker Mayfield conversation has to be about a recalibration of expectation, right? If we just stop talking about who we thought Baker was going to be and just say right now, if you'd asked me a few months ago, I thought Baker might be out of the league this year or just a backup somewhere. So for him to be coming in and playing at a high enough level for them to be 3-1 and doing enough efficiently for them to be there, I mean, I think Tampa Bay's got some talent around them. I wonder if they've just sort of snuck up on us. And part of this is also, let's acknowledge the other team in the division while we're talking about the whole division. Carolina just sucks. And I don't have any faith in Carolina at all. But at the same time, that's partially Frank Reich. That's partially, Carolina's offense just doesn't look any good. But they did at least give Minnesota a heck of a game today. I walked away from the Minnesota beating Carolina 21-13 feeling like I felt worse about both teams.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. There was a time when it's 10-zip. You're like, this is how the Kirk Cousins era ends. They're going to lose to 0-3 Carolina. They're going to go to 0-4. It's over. Like this is, and then Carolina just can't score. They didn't score one offensive touchdown in this game. And at some point, look, I like Bryce Young. I think he's going to be good. I hate the microwave analysis of all quarterbacks where if they're not good in their first month of their career, that means they're never going to be good. I hate that. So I hate doing this, but they traded the 2024 possible first overall pick to move up and get Bryce Young. And they traded a lot more than that. But right now, it looks like that pick could be first overall. And you do have to wonder, like, what if Carolina would have just waited it out? Like, maybe they're the team to just sign a Baker Mayfield type and just patch it together for a year. And hey, we're not tanking per se, but we're okay if we get the first pick. They get a Caleb Williams. I mean, nothing against Bryce Young, who I still like as a prospect, but he hasn't been good. And now you've probably given the Chicago Bears the first pick of the draft, or unless the Chicago Bears earn it themselves, we'll talk about them. It might turn out to be one of those trades you look back and you just say they were impatient to get a quarterback and they ended up getting the wrong one.
It's also possible, though, man, that they just got the wrong quarterback because look, I love RG3. RG3's a buddy. Shout out RG3. Great work. He tweeted out today, CJ Stroud is not only not only the best of the rookie quarterbacks, he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL today, right now, a month into his career. I don't know that I'm going to go that far to just immediately anoint, but CJ Stroud continues to absolutely light it up for Houston. Houston wins 30-6 over Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett looks abysmal in this game. He did get injured in this game, which is an important part of the note here, but Pittsburgh went back to having no offense. But in the meantime, Houston continues to, remember, Carolina had a shot at C.J. Stroud. Carolina had a shot at Anthony Richardson. Part of the history on here is going to be, did they get the right quarterback? But C.J. Stroud, and particularly the way Houston is playing right now, Houston's far better than anybody expected. On draft night, there were people saying, well, think about it. Houston, they gave up all of this to get two guys, and what's it really going to mean for their future? It means they're a much better football team right now.
Yeah, I mean, Stroud continues to impress. Matt Harmon, our awesome colleague who over on the fantasy side.
Well, let's not overblow it. I mean, he's
he's all right. He's all right. Yeah, he tweeted out, the Nico Collins touchdown. I was like, oh, Nico Collins is a beast. And I was like, Nico Collins didn't have any choice but to catch that ball. Did you CJ Stroud threw a rope to hit Nico Collins right in the hands? I was like, it takes your breath away, that kind of throw. And that's a rookie in his fourth game. CJ Stroud looks like the real deal. Great pick by them. And I liked him coming out of college. And I don't think he's just in the long line of failed Ohio State quarterbacks. I think he's legit. They got the right guy. D'Amico Ryans, I love him as a coach. They're finally getting something going in Houston. This was a statement win for them. The Steelers, they just hadn't looked. They had the record. They were fine. They're 2-1. But anybody who's watched the games knew that Pittsburgh ain't quite right. And then Pickett was just awful at this game before he got hurt, and Freiermuth gets hurt. And it's really it might unravel a little bit for the Steelers here with the injuries and just not playing that well. And obviously, a lot of it goes back to their offense coordinator, Matt Canada. Everybody on earth wants him fired. And you wonder if Mike Tomlin's, his stubbornness with not making a move at offense coordinator this past offseason is really going to bite him because that offense stinks right now.
Yeah, but pride's the downfall of man, even for Mike Tomlin in that situation. And I wrote down something you just said. They got the right guy. And I think, mentioning C.J. Stroud, you can go across the board and say this time, no matter what the Texans have done in the past with their hiring, their drafting, who they brought in, they got the right guy all the way across the board. I believe they got the right coach. I believe they got the right quarterback. Will Anderson Jr., I believe, was the right guy for them to get in the draft also. I just feel like they did everything so smart, and it's paying such immediate dividends. Part of this is that the Steelers' offense is abysmal, but you still had to put up 30 points on a Steelers defense. It gets a lot of credit, right? And that comes because you had a quarterback that seemed to be one step ahead of the Steelers throughout the course of that game. So
without Laramie Tunsil, by the way, let's point out that he was without his Pro Bowl left tackle, and C.J. Stroud you're right, that Steelers front seven is a monster. T.J. Watt and all that. C.J. Stroud was never rattled in this game. I am so impressed with him. He's playing behind a bad offensive line. It's really beat up with injuries. It's not their fault necessarily, but just the poise he shows. There are nothing but good things to say about C.J. Stroud through 4 games.
Yeah, you're 1,000% right. Let's take a look at the other quarterback that we just mentioned that also wasn't selected first overall. That was back. Anthony Richardson back in the game for the Colts, and It was I use this word too much, but it was a plucky effort for the Colts. Like it felt like the Rams were what didn't feel like the Rams were. The Rams were doing this is like the trend of the season this year. Blowout game, fourth quarter suddenly becomes close, right? Like the Rams had this game under control, and then all of a sudden Indy just rages back, and Anthony Richardson didn't have a great day throwing the ball. I'm not going to disguise that. But at the end, he had some big throws that he needed to have, and he found a way to keep him in this game. They go to overtime. The Rams get the 29-23 win, and it continues to sort the narratives from both sides. The Rams deserve some credit for being far better than people expected, and so do the Colts. Like, unlike the last game when we were talking about Minnesota, Carolina, I walked away from this game feeling better about both teams.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, you thought, the Rams were going to run away with this. They were up huge. It was probably 20-zip at one point.
Yeah.
But Anthony Richardson's got something, man. And you're right. Like, it wasn't always pretty for him today. But at the end of the day, you're like, he dragged them back into this game. He made a couple throws. He made one throw where he pretty much got his arm hit, and he threw at a really weird release point. It's still just whistled out for a 45-yard dime to somebody. I'll try to retweet it, because it was just one of those, like, my God, this kid's just built in a lab somewhere. He is really, really impressive. Not just his physical skills, but just his mental toughness, staying in the game, his competitive nature. I like everything about Anthony Richardson, even though they didn't win here. That's okay, because, I mean, the Rams, they're a good team. Sean McVay's a good coach. Like, he's proving that again, that a lot of people love this whole, like, Sean McVay's overrated. No, he's not. He's a great, great coach. He's doing maybe his best work this year with this team. Nobody thought was going to be good. And yet every single game they've been competitive. They're 2-2. I'm pretty impressed. Puka Nacua, I mean, quarterbacks win awards, so I assume that it's going to be Stroud or Richardson, but Nakua's putting up numbers that are like, this kid might win Offensive Rookie of the Year. I mean, it's been really, really impressive. He gets a game winner in overtime. How they plucked this guy out of the fifth round is amazing. But when Cooper Kupp comes back, the Rams are going to have a pretty darn good offense. It's actually I thought it was going to be the worst team in the NFL or up there. They're a really fun team to watch. They're really, as you said, plucky. They're really, you turn them on, you know what you're getting out of the Rams. You're getting a really good effort and some fun football.
Yeah, and there's this moment where I want to give Stafford his due too, because much like Tua, we've talked so much about his health. He got knocked around today a bunch of times, and there were times that it looked like he was gingerly walking about, right? It took a beating. That Colts defense was out to try and make a physical impression, right? And he continued to stand through and deliver the ball. I mean, I think through all of this, they've got young weapons that have needed the veteran presence of Stafford to really, help pull them through. So a lot of credit to the Rams overall in how they did that. While we're just wrapping up young quarterbacks that played, the debut of one Aiden O'Connell happened today, and that had me very excited for my beloved Raiders for a minute. It didn't go poorly. It didn't go great, but there was this. There was a calm. There was a cool. There was a collected to Aiden O'Connell. Like the Raiders down big in this game. They were down 24-7. It felt like this thing was just going to be way out of hand. They managed to come back. They have a chance to tie the game late in the game. Bad throws, an interception that loses it for him. Aiden O'Connell spent too much. He stood in the pocket too long frequently and just never felt Khalil Mack. Like Khalil Mack was a beast, unblockable. 6 sacks in this, 6 sacks in this game. Yeah, 6 sacks in this game, unstoppable. Big win for the Chargers and a heartbreaking loss for my beloved Raiders.
Yeah, and I feel a little bad that you have to bear the brunt of me ripping Josh McDaniels every week, because you're not Charles Robinson. You're not the guy who is defending him. But yet I still feel the need to take my victory laps. It amazed me that after the game, and it's not the full quote, it's a snippet. I'm probably taking a little bit out of context, but McDaniels was asked about Aiden. He's like, well, in the NFL, you got to take care of the ball. Are you going to really throw your rookie quarterback under the bus like that? Because on first and goal, when you have an all-pro running back behind you and you're playing a Chargers run defense, it's terrible. Like that, Chargers run defense is awful. We all know that. You have Aiden O'Connell throw this really slow developing pick play. Ted Wynn on Twitter did a great job breaking down how this was just a bad play call. And he throws the interception to Asante Samuel, who, by the way, somehow slides down. Like, Asante, please, you could run for the pick six. That's okay to do that. He kept the Raiders kind of alive for a second there. But I just couldn't believe Josh McDaniels would throw his rookie quarterback under the bus. I get it was a bad game script, but O'Connell dropped back 39 times in his debut. Well, Josh Jacobs ran 17 times. This is coaching. He's a bad head coach. His record shows that. And it's like for him to sit up there after the game and say, well, the quarterback's job at the NFL is to protect the ball. Well, yeah, okay, man. Like maybe protect him a little bit too. Maybe call a little bit better game. Just bad. This is another Josh McDaniels loss. I put it on him. They had a shot in this game. It's not like they didn't know that Joey Bosa wasn't going to play. He's doubtful. You would think that, okay, we only have to worry about Khalil Mack in this game. We could protect, blah, blah, blah. Just let Khalil Mack go crazy. And yeah, Aiden held the ball too long, but he shouldn't be dropping back and throwing 39 times either. It's just a kind of a debacle for the Raiders today.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, it should be pointed out the Raiders were running the ball really well in the fourth quarter. So to your point, when you have first and goal, do what's been going incredibly well for you as you come down that only would have made sense. And but also, I don't want to lose in this for the second straight week. Staley almost gave the game away. Like a 4th and 1 from deep in their own territory. He goes for the 4th and 1. It gets shoved. Like the Raiders were down a touchdown. And I know that the Raiders offense at that point was starting to move the ball, but Raiders down a touchdown. You gave them a short field to walk down and have the chance to tie the game. And I mean, I don't understand it.
It's amazing to me. This I thought was the right call. When they're inches short, as 4th and inches, I'm like, you got to go for it. You got to do the quarterback sneak. And he did it. And it just didn't turn out right. And I just feel like at some point, Brandon Staley, when it comes to 4th downs, he's the guy who's doubling down on 11 and constantly getting a 2, right? Or an ace. Like, it's just like he makes the right call a lot of times and it just never turns out right. I actually thought it was the right call. I'm not going to rip Staley for that decision.
I'm ripping him, though, because the hand, like Justin Herbert's hand was so jacked up. Like now you're going to try and do the quarterback sneak in that situation, and you're putting him in the middle of that. Like, by the way, his hand, Justin Herbert's left hand, non-throwing hand, got hurt late in the game. We'll keep all eyes on that because the Chargers are already decimated by injuries, and anything less than 100% of Justin Herbert will take their season off the rails. I don't know that I walked away from that game feeling good about the Chargers. I did walk away from that game agreeing with you that the Raiders are just a dumpster fire. I was maybe the most surprised today by what we saw, frankly, out of Washington against Philadelphia. I thought Philadelphia was just going to go in and just, whip them around and make, especially after last week. What we saw Buffalo do to Washington, you're like, oh, well, that will transfer over. It did not. Washington came in and played their tails off. They lose 34-31 in overtime. Here's the real question to me. They tie the game with no time left.
Here we go. Yep.
Do you go for 2?
Yeah, absolutely. You go for 2. I'm sitting there screaming, Ron, go for 2, Riverboat Ron, right? And when they brought on the extra point team, I think me, you, and every Washington fan knew it's game over. That's it. Well, because you're a big underdog on the road. Philly's a great football team. They really, we'll talk about them in just a heartbeat. But you got a shot from the 2-yard line to go win that game. Go. You have the momentum. You just scored on the last play of regulation. You have one play from 2 yards out to go win a football game. Don't take your chances in overtime. Like, I hated that they kicked the extra point there. If you're the favorite, if you're at home, if you're the better team, sure, I get it. Kick the extra point, go to overtime. The Washington Commanders are clearly not the better team in this matchup, and they're on the road. It was a missed opportunity. I'm sure the Eagles were thrilled. I thought the Eagles were like, okay, we'll take overtime. We don't want to have to defend one play for our game right here. So I just didn't like that at all for the Commanders, kicking the extra point there and just taking overtime because you knew they were going to lose. But what's up with Philly, man? It's like they're 4-0, so it's kind of hard to get really riled up. Like, oh my God, what's wrong with Philly? But at the same time, we watch this team every week and we're like, something's just not clicking with them like it was last year. Part of that, hey, they set the bar so high. They were awesome last year. It's hard to replicate that. But in this game especially, there are times where I'm like, they kind of probably deserve to lose this game. Washington's probably in many ways outplayed them, and they couldn't get it done. But what's wrong with Philly? Are you worried at all about Philly? I don't know where I am with them. Really?
No, yeah. I'm worried. And I think part of this comes down to 2 new coordinators, right? Like, I just think that plays a role in all of it.
Yeah.
The offense doesn't look in sync, right? It just doesn't. Like, Jalen Hurts is making all the right plays. It's fine. It just doesn't look as last year. I felt like we were watching the growth of a superhero, right? Like it just felt like this unbelievable moment. And now everything just feels so laborious because I wanted to use a big word. It just it doesn't flow right, and it's still happening. They're still winning, but I also want to be consistent here. Like last year, I think a lot of us were harsh about the Vikings winning games they probably shouldn't have won. The Eagles have won a couple of games this year that I'm looking at and saying, well, I mean, and the eye test has to matter, right? Yeah, I know you're winning football games, so everything's fine. Everything's coming up roses. But right now, on being real, neutral field right now, if I had to take Philadelphia or Dallas, I'm taking the Cowboys. I know they laid the egg last week against the Cardinals, but I'm taking what we've seen for the majority of the season from the Cowboys over what we've seen so far from the Eagles. I think the Eagles are a great football team. They just haven't played like it yet.
Right. I mean, the Eagles laid egg today. They just escaped with a win. If Ron Rivera goes for 2, we're talking about the Eagles 20 minutes ago in this podcast because we're like, oh my God, they got upset. This was their egg. This was just as bad as what Dallas put on the field against Arizona last week. It's just the Eagles escaped with a win. So yeah, you might be right. I don't know where I am with Philly. It just hasn't been Philly yet. And the roster is there, the talent's there. They're probably going to be, one of those top 2 or 3 teams in the NFL by the end. But yeah, it's been hard for them to kind of replicate what they did last year.
Yeah, but I'm not looking at what we saw from Philly and thinking it's as dominant as what we saw from San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco beats Arizona 35-16. Arizona, again, at times in this game, they were more competitive than I thought they would be. I will give them that credit. But San Francisco just find the weakness. I don't know what the weakness is for San Francisco. Like if you're sitting down as a coach and you're saying, all right, we need to beat this team by, there is no easy way to beat the 49ers.
No, not at all. Brock Purdy today was 20 of 21 and he averaged 13.5 yards per attempt. Like, I mean, what? Like, what are we even doing here? And I think a conversation that's going to start to happen is Christian McCaffrey an MVP? I'm so cynical about everybody voting quarterbacks for everything. So I think the answer is no. But Christian McCaffrey this year has 600 yards in 4 games, 7 touchdowns. He had 4 touchdowns in this game. He's scored a touchdown 13 straight games, counting playoffs for the 49ers. New team record, beat Jerry Rice's record. That guy was pretty good. Is Christian McCaffrey the MVP of the league right now? I think you can make a case. If we're in a fair world where running backs and receivers and defensive players and all that have a shot at MVP, like a real shot, a fair shot, I think you can have the argument that Christian McCaffrey is the MVP of the NFL right now. He's playing at that level, at least.
I am so angry with what Brock Purdy is going to do for quarterback play for the next 20 years. Because now every guy that's taken in the 6th or 7th round, fans are going to be like, no, you got to get him out there, man. He might be Brock Purdy. No, like I think the diamond in the rough here is pretty well established. It's fair to come in and say, wanted to see what he looked like post-surgery, wanted to see what he looked like in year 2 when teams have had time to adjust to him. What he's looked like is a surgeon. I mean, he's clinical with what he does.
I was so wrong, Fitz. I was so wrong. I spent all summer being like, Brock Purdy, I don't know, elbow surgery. Can he do this again? He's freaking awesome. What do you do with this 49ers team? Like everybody's going to talk about, like we talked about it before. Everyone's going to talk about the Bills this week. Oh, the Bills. Maybe they're a team to beat. The San Francisco 49ers have just gone out there every single week and whooped whoever's in front of them. And I don't see that slowing down at all. Like you said, where's the weakness? Find me a weakness on this 49ers team. Unless they start to take on injuries or something, I don't really see how you could get over on this 49ers team. They're so good in every way. And a lot of that is Purdy not just repeating what he did last year, but getting much, much better than what he did last year. He looks like a new guy. He looks like and he was good last year, obviously. And he looks even better than that this year.
So if we take a big, deep breath and soak in all of that greatness, the exact opposite is Denver versus Chicago. But it turned out like the Broncos-Bears game actually turned out to be really entertaining. I'll be honest, like as much as it was bad football, it was really entertaining. And the Broncos, they find a way to win this thing, 31-28 final score on it, and all the way down to the wire. Like Justin Fields, and I'll give credit to both quarterbacks. Both quarterbacks have very good numbers when it comes to completion percentage. Justin Fields did it for actual yards as opposed to Russell Wilson, who had a bunch of completions for very little. Like Justin Fields played the best game that we've seen of his career, but I can't stop thinking about the end shot where he's just sitting on the bench alone, dejected after somehow, some way they still lose this game. And there's such a weird vibe around the Bears as a whole. I don't know why they're keeping Eberflus at this point, other than the tradition they don't fire. Like it feels like there needs to be an injection of something for Chicago because they have this Eeyore vibe over them.
Yeah. And even with the Fields game, and he looked good, put up numbers. I'm just like, yeah, the Broncos defense is terrible. Oh my God, they're terrible. They're the sixth highest paid defense in the league as far as total salary goes. And they're incompetent. They are absolutely awful. But they still get the win because the Bears were even worse. Like, this is just amazing to me how bad Eberflus is. I'm surprised that this didn't become more of an issue. And maybe it's because everybody started talking about other things like Chase Claypool and stuff. But they have 4th and 1. They can just, okay, it's about 2.5 minutes left in the game. Let's kick a 35-yard field goal and take the lead, right? Well, that's what you should do. They're out there on 4th and 1, and they're trying to like draw them off sides. I'm like, okay, you're just trying to draw them off sides. Now you're kicking your field goal. Cool. They call timeout, and they just put their offense back out there again. And Khalil Herbert gets stuffed for no gain. And instead of just taking the lead right there, which you should have done, and afterwards, Eberflus was saying, that's because we're running the ball really well. Well, so what? Like, the game management is part of your job too. And you just cost your team a win. Cost your team a chance to win. And great that, I'm sure a lot of Bears fans are actually probably happy about that. You're one step closer to Caleb Williams. Matt Eberflus ain't going to be around to coach him. He's not tanking out there. He's just bad. Like, and then after the game, he's saying, yeah, I gave Chase Claypool the choice whether he wanted to come or not. And then Bears PR has to say, no, nobody was given the choice. He was told to stay home. Like, it's just such a clown show with the Chicago Bears right now. They need to fire this guy. Just to keep up, that we're a competent NFL organization. We can't allow this to be happening. If you keep that guy around 17 games, it ain't going to get better. You're just kind of just wasting the rest of the year. You just have to make a statement that this is not acceptable in the NFL. That's where the Bears are right now. And wow, tied the biggest collapse for a loss in team history. They were up 21 and blew that. Everything about the Bears is just absolutely positively awful at this point.
There was a period when they were kicking the snot out of the Broncos where I was wondering, man, are the Broncos going to be that bad this year? Like, are the Broncos going to be?
I don't want to give the Broncos too much credit. Yeah, you came back. Good for you. You were still down 28-7 at one point to the Bears, and you look like the worst team in football. Like, let's throw a parade here in Denver for the Broncos. Like, they're still terrible too. It's just the Bears refused to win this game. They were like, no, we are not going to. We are going to make sure we lose this game. And sure enough, they did, thanks to their head coach.
One team that I think was a little surprising on one side of the ball, the only game we haven't gotten to actually, Cleveland loses 28-3 to Baltimore. Now, I think when we found out there was no Deshaun Watson and DTR was going to be playing quarterback, I kind of expected that this was going to go off the rails for Cleveland offensively. But giving up 28 points is, and I understand that, the seesaw of all of this, giving up 28 points was pretty surprising to me for a Baltimore offense that really hasn't clicked, taking on a Cleveland team that's defense has been absolutely impenetrable.
Lamar, man. I mean, it was a game. If you're a box score scout, you look at it, you say, Lamar threw for 186. That's fine. He rushed for 27 yards. That's fine. But if you actually watch this game when it was competitive, he was just controlling everything. He was really, really good today. They didn't need him in the second half. They just, they knew that DTR wasn't bringing the Cleveland Browns back, so they're not having Lamar drop back much. He only ends up with 19 pass attempts. I thought Lamar was excellent in this game, and just it seems to be that the offense is starting to click with him, and it was going to take some time. New coordinator, brand new scheme, a totally different way of going about the offense for them, and it did seem in this game like, okay, this is what we expected. He was really in a good rhythm in this game. I thought this was a Lamar game, totally. And for the Browns, it's a big disappointment because, as of Friday, Deshaun Watson's like, yeah, I expect to play. And Stefanski's like, yeah, he's probably going to play. And then he can't answer the bell. Injuries happen, but I hate to just keep coming back and just kind of dunking on Deshaun Watson, but $230 million quarterback. Like, you're 2-2 now. Like, I get injuries happen. You can't just play through them, but this was a disappointment that he couldn't answer the bell, and DTR wasn't it. I mean, he 121 yards passing, never looked good or comfortable in this game. A tough loss for the Browns, but the thing I take out of this is Lamar is as elite as he's ever been. He's just a great football player, and I thought this was a stamp of approval for Lamar Jackson in this offense. Like, before the game, Mark Andrews was asked about the injuries. NFL Network, Sarah Walsh over there, and Mark Andrews said, yeah, we got a lot of injuries, but as long as we got Lamar, anything is possible. And a little dramatic, obviously, but it's kind of true, too. Like, as long as the Ravens have Lamar Jackson, they're going to win a lot of football games.
The other side for Cleveland, I think that we have to remember is, like, we're getting this living, breathing proof that at the end of the day, you've got to have a backup. You've got like the number of backup quarterbacks that have been thrown into action that just we have no idea if they can even win games. Like this, knowing how tightly contested the AFC is going to be for some of these better teams. One game could be the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. Like it's going to be tight this year. So you've got to have somebody. And this is where we're in this weird chapter of quarterbacks in the NFL where it feels like there's a new crop that's coming in and there's an older crop that's sort of aged out. And the backup quarterbacks along across the league just feel like there's a lot of bad, just a lot of very bad and ill capable of just stepping in and saying, yep, I can get you one game. Like I always thought, as long as your backup quarterback can get you through one game, you're fine. And you look across the board, like part of the reason we see the difference in standings right now, the Colts had that guy, right? The mustache man was that guy for them, you know, but then you look over to teams like Cleveland, they don't. And across the board, we've seen so many teams go to their backups already. It just feels like that's a theme for the NFL. You got to start using a draft pick, in my mind, later in the draft on somebody you can develop that's going to be part of your organization for a long time, that's just going to hold the clipboard, know the offense, be able to get you a win.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, and they had Joshua Dobbs, right? Like they probably thought at the end of training camp, like, oh my God, we're getting a late round draft pick for Joshua Dobbs. The DTRs look really good in the preseason. Sure, go for it. And Dobbs has been maybe the most surprising quarterback in the NFL so far. He's looked actually really good with the Cardinals. Don't you wish the Browns probably wish they had him today rather than that 5th round pick or whatever they got from the Cardinals back for him? Like, yes, you're right. Like, I mean, if you just don't give away quarterback depth because he could have made a difference today. The way he's playing Cardinals, you don't know. I mean, if he would have played that well off the bench today, but he would have given them a better chance than DTR did. And they need Watson. Like the offense is already kind of hamstrung without Nick Chubb. Without Watson, it's going to just be bad. They're not going to win any games until Watson comes back.
1,000%. So that takes us to Monday Night Football. And my Giants buddy was just blowing me up today about this is the most must-win game in years for the Giants because they're about to have a gauntlet of games. And if they don't beat Seattle at home, the entire season is washed and everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket. Saquon's out. Andrew Thomas, or Saquon and Andrew Thomas are both doubtful, I should say, to play in this game. I want to be a beacon of light for my friends and be like, yeah, but I don't know, man. This just feels like a bad matchup for the Giants to me.
It does. The one thing I'll say, and this comes from my gambling side of it, is I can't figure out a reason why the Seattle Seahawks aren't a bigger favorite in this game. They're underdogs most of the week. It did flip. I couldn't figure out that line all week. And I also don't know anybody in my orbit who can figure out that line. Every single person I know is like, yeah, Seahawks are right. So when you know what happens when that's the case, like this is when the NFL just totally screws us up and the Giants go on to win, right? Like when everybody's on one game, the other side's going to hit. Like, I know that's dumb analysis, but it's also very true, isn't it, Fitz?
Yeah, no, it always seems to work out that way. And the challenge when you're taking on Seattle is you've got to take away one or the other. So you can't let Kenneth Walker III beat you and let one of the wide receivers beat you. You got to take one of the two sides of the game out. Chino, I think, has played pretty well so far this year, obviously. Their offense has looked as explosive as it needs to be, right? So I think Seattle's playing pretty well. And it feels like, again, like just use the pixie dust or whatever, like whatever was on the Giants last year that just felt like everything was coming up roses is not there this year. So it's like you're standing on the cliff and the whole season's in the balance and we're only a few games in. It's only a quarter of the way through. And a month from now, we'll all be saying, why did we overreact? But I also understand why fans are sitting here saying, man, we paid Daniel Jones and we paid Saquon for this year. And this was supposed to lead to something. And right now it above and beyond everything else, the Giants, I don't know if they'll win this game. It doesn't feel like the Giants are a very good football team right now. And that at the end of the day is what they've got to figure out.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if you're going to talk yourself into the Giants winning tomorrow, you have to overlook the fact that they're not very good. Like, they look bad. They've been bad for 3 weeks, except for 2 quarters against the Cardinals. And we'll see. But and the funny thing is, you talked about how your Giants fan friend is like, oh, look at this gauntlet coming. The players know that too. This whole garbage of, we take it one game at a time. I don't even know who we play next week. Maybe a few guys are that way. They all know. They know that this is a must-win game because of what we got coming up. So you're going to see the best effort out of the Giants in this game. I'll tell you that. I don't know how much that's worth because the Giants are a bad football team, but they know. They know that this is a very big game for them as far as this season could really slip out of control if they don't win this one.
So the Raiders are 1-3, and they have the Packers, the Patriots, and the Bears for the next 3 weeks. You're telling me I'm about to go on a roll. I'm allowed to do this now, Frank. I'm allowed to do this. I'm about to go on a roll. It's gonna feel good. Does that make us mortal enemies for the Packers coming in and because I mean, huh? No? Okay. All right. I was trying to create more rivalry. Charles McDonald will be back on Tuesday with the exempt list. You don't want to miss that. I'm back on Wednesday with Charles Robinson and Jory Epstein for inside coverage. You can follow us on Twitter. You should follow us on Twitter at Jason Fitz or X. Sorry, I guess it's called X now. I can never get used to that.
Whatever's Twitter. It's Twitter.
Yeah,
You're fine. You're fine.
Frank is at Yahoo Schwab. And, of course, Stone, producer extraordinaire, is at SJ Rochelle behind the glass. Leave us a 5-star review. Rate, subscribe. Tell your friends, your family, your enemies. Tell everybody to check out every single episode of the new show. Thanks for hanging out with us. We will see you next Sunday.